answers session. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome, a warm welcome to everyone from the EFDD group. I'd like to start the evening with a short video.
It is not the right time to launch legislation that includes an in-out referendum. I don't think an in-out referendum is the answer. We're not having a referendum on in or out of the European Union. I think the idea of an in-out referendum is wrong. I don't support holding a referendum that is not our policy, nor do I think leaving is the right answer. We will give the British people a referendum.
I'm here to represent the ordinary men and women of our country.
Ask yourself a question. Would you buy a used car from this commission? The question that I want to ask, that we're all going to ask is, who are you? Who voted for you? Right across every member state in this union, and perhaps this is why we see the fear in the faces, increasingly people are saying, we don't want that flag, we don't want the anthem, we don't want this political class. We want the whole thing consigned to the dustbin of history.
I don't support holding a referendum.
We await the results of the European elections.
I'm British. I believe the best people to govern Britain are the British people themselves. We're going to fight damned hard in the next few weeks and put that choice on the ballot paper for you on May the 22nd.
The UK Independence Party has managed to win over the hearts of the majority of the British public.
The People's Army of UKIP have spoken tonight.
What a tremendous surge in the vote.
We are launching the biggest outreach campaign in the history of the Eurosceptic movement.
I'm delighted that the process of British reform and renegotiation and the referendum that we're going to hold, that process is now properly underway. The changes that we need are changes that are good for Britain and good for Europe. They do involve treaty change.
The BBC has learned that he accepts it may not be possible to change EU treaties.
It is not acceptable. It is an appalling way to behave. I'm not paying that bill. If people think I are, they got another thing coming. It is not going to happen.
If anyone thinks I'm going to pay this now, because obviously he'll pay it later.
Net migration to this country will be in the order of tens of thousands each year, not the hundreds of thousands every year that we've seen over the last decade.
His ambition on reducing net migration fast turning into a political embarrassment.
Thank you. Okay, with technology, we should have this microphone working now. Can you hear me? From the back? Good. That's great. And now our first speaker this evening, and a very good friend of ours, Simon Richards, who is the Chief Executive of the Freedom Association, which describes itself as a non-partisan, libertarian pressure group. Also, as head of the Better Off Out campaign, Simon's actively involved in discussing British membership of the European Union, which has earned him a position as one of the most influential right-wingers in UK politics. Thank you, Simon.
Can you hear me, first of all? That's good. Well, a very good evening to you, ladies and gentlemen. A rather miserable November evening. I must first of all, just in case any of you think that I'm doing a sort of Jeremy Corbyn impression, I've left my poppy at home, that's all. But I'm a great believer in the Royal British Legion and all it stands for. First of all, I'd just like to thank all of you so very much for coming along here this evening. Because for 40 years now, the politicians, the political class in this country, have tried to keep people in the dark about the reality of the European Union, what it really means. They've been, I think, very patronising to us. they like to keep us in the dark because they can then say, well, you don't know anything about it. You can't have a vote on it. You can't decide Britain's future. And you get people that, like Ken Clarke, who didn't actually bother reading the Maastricht Treaty. So I think it's very much suited them to keep you in the dark. And I very much applaud what the EFDD has done in holding these meetings, and this is just one of many around this region and around the UK. And I just would also like to say what a real pleasure and honour it is to share a platform with people I really admire very much. First of all, Jim has had the dubious fortune of having to share platforms with me a couple of times already recently, and an absolutely tremendous person for whom I've got the highest regard. But I want to say how particularly delighted I am to share this platform with Bill. Bill and I have known each other for a few years. He's an absolutely tremendous guy who believes passionately in freedom and this country. And I do just wish that there were more MEPs like Bill and Jim around who really have principles and belief and put their country above any sort of narrow party cause. So, now I mentioned that for 40 years that we'd been kept in the dark about the EU, and I just want to say very briefly a little bit about the organisation I represent, the Freedom Association, because we were actually founded 40 years ago. In fact, we're having our 40th anniversary dinner on the 2nd of December. That was 2nd of December 1975 we were founded. And we were set up in I think what is a very dark time for this country and for British politics. In 1975, now most of you look far younger than me, but I think one or two of you will probably remember it. And we'd seen the unions take over this country. It's in a 3-day week. I'm sure you'll remember it very well, though you probably try not to. And I think what had happened in that time, in that era, and the years leading up to that, is that people had lost belief in their own country. And above all, I think it was the political class that had lost belief in their country. And I think that's the main reason why this country was taken into the European Union in the first place. It was a lack of belief. And I have to say, I'm a great, I'm not a UKIP member, but I very much admire the slogan you have, that UKIP has, which is "Believe in Britain," and I think that is actually what it's all about. And I'm convinced that the people of this country believe in Britain far more than their political class do. So the Freedom Association was set up in 1940, 40 years ago, in 1975, by a man of tremendous courage, the McWhirter twins, and tragically, one of those twins was murdered just days before we launched in 1975. That was Ross McWhirter, who had very courageously put up a reward for information leading to the arrest of IRA bombers who committed some atrocities in pub bombings. I'm sure many of you will remember these. And he paid with his life. He was gunned down in his own home in North London. A man of true courage and principle. And that's, I think, what the Freedom Association has always stood for putting their country first, for putting freedom first, and having courage about that. And more recently, in fact, it was back in 2006, 9 years ago now, the Freedom Association launched the Better Off Out campaign. And I just want to very briefly explain what that's about. Essentially, up until that point, lots of people were calling themselves Eurosceptics. And it was a very convenient term, especially if you were a conservative, a conservative trying to get selected for a safe seat. because the members, the British people and the Conservative Party members, they liked Euroscepticism. They didn't like the EU. So it was a very handy term that covered a multitude of sins. And what we did, in fact, our president, Christopher Gill, who may be known to some of you, was the first member of Parliament to get up in the House of Commons and say we would be better off out of the European Union. People had skirted around it since then. And then a great guy called Philip Davis set up the Better Off Out group. And that's flourished. And a number of MPs who were prepared to put their principles above their careers signed up to that. And we've been working very hard ever since then to try to put that case, very simple case, that Britain would be better off out of the European Union. And it's a very positive case because we don't really need to, in my opinion, to criticise the European Union. Its faults are so overwhelming. It's corrupt, it's inefficient, it's an economic disaster area, it's opposed to our freedoms. You could go on forever, and I don't want to do that because I'm sure Jim and Bill will do that much better than me anyway. And you will know. I think it started an earthquake here.
Low-flying aircraft.
It's a low-flying aircraft. Low-flying aircraft. That's better. I think that's them trying to stop me saying any more about the bad things about the EU.
Brussels calling.
Yeah, Brussels calling. But the point we wanted to make is that I think there's a positive future. That we all know that EU is wrong, but what's the future for this country? And I think that we can have a much brighter and better future outside the confines of the European Union. Because as it stands at the moment, it's like we're chained to a corpse. And there is a bright future there. We can trade again with the world. We can do business again with our friends in the Commonwealth. And this is not a racial thing. India, the world's largest democracy, has so much in common with this country. Every area of the world is expanding economically at the moment, apart from one. Which one's that? You were absolutely correct. Every other area of the world is expanding. There is a great bright future for us there. We don't need to fear. So I think it's so important that we be positive. And I'm absolutely convinced if we're positive, we're going to win this campaign. Now, I just want to... So I've said a little bit about the Freedom Association and what our Better Off Out campaign's about. And I just want to talk now a little bit more about the referendum campaign and some recent developments. Because I'm sure you've heard a lot of people saying, well, that everybody on the pro-Britain side is very divided. There are all these divisions, all these different groups. Well, I think that's very exaggerated. And I think it's been very encouraging in the last couple of weeks in particular. There is, I think, a coming together of people realising from different groups, from different parties, realising that we must all unite for the greater good of freeing Britain from the European Union. And there have been some very positive developments on that. I'm sure you'll have seen the launch of the pro-EU outfit, the BSE campaign, a rather unfortunate term. What is it? Britain stronger in Europe. But we all know what happened, what BSE did, and I think it's a very appropriate term for them. A very lacklustre launch. Even the press, I think, slated it massively. The BBC sort of gave them quite a nice press, but we'd expect that, wouldn't we? But on our side, there are now these two campaigns. There's Leave.eu, which I know Nigel Farage has been working very closely with. But the other campaign, Vote Leave, is also going well. There's some very good people in that as well. Douglas Carrs was in it. And I think we need to move on from people saying, well, our campaign's better than the other. We passionately believe in working with everybody. And that's not just with UKIP, with Conservatives, with Labour people. I'll even work, and Bill knows that I'm no left winger, but we will happily work with communists in this cause to free this country if need be, because the whole point about the need for us to leave the EU, quite apart from the huge economic benefits that will be leaving, it's a matter of democracy. It's do we want to retain control of our own country, have the right to elect whoever we like? If the people of this country want to elect Jeremy Corbyn, let them do it, and then 5 years later they can put somebody else in. That's a decision for the British people. Under the European Union, there is no change of government. There is no democracy. It is actively anti-democratic. There is never any change. And that fundamentally negates the principles of democracy and freedom that this country has stood for hundreds of years. Now, I just want to look at some of the other developments in the last week or so. I don't know if any of you saw the other day, there was something called the Prosperity Index came out, an organisation called the Legatum Institute. It's a very, very pucker organisation, came out with its Prosperity Index. Now, we're told by those wonderful people at the CBI, the Confederation, I was thinking it's Confederation Against British Industry, but I think it's Confederation for British Industry. Those are the people that told us we'd be absolutely ruined if we didn't go into the euro. We're told that we'll be doomed if we leave the EU. Well, the Prosperity Index, does anybody know which country in the whole world, this Prosperity Index is every single country in the world, does anybody know which country came top of that Prosperity Index?
Norway.
Absolutely, Norway. Any guesses for which was second? I rest my case. Yeah, absolutely, it was Switzerland. I rest my case. Those two, good countries that have had the good sense to remain free from the EU are flourishing. We, as a much larger economy, would, in my opinion, flourish even more. So this idea, these old ideas that we'll lose 3 million jobs, they are nothing but fantasy. And in fact, the man who actually came up with that original the research that the 3 million jobs lie was based on has himself said that it was being grossly misused. So the pro-EU side is in trouble. I think there's no question about that at the moment. Their launch went badly. The people on our side are coming together well, and they are in a mess. And I think what's becoming apparent is that David Cameron's claims of renegotiation really are not worth the paper that they're not even written on. And I think what we're going to see over the next few weeks is a lot of people who have been prepared to give Cameron the benefit of the doubt. I think when they see the reality, I think a lot of those people will come over to our side. And I think a lot of them already are doing so. But of course, what we do need to be prepared for is an almost relentless torrent of scare stories. Anybody who followed the Scottish referendum will have seen those. Now, I'm not taking sides. I'm no fan of Alex Salmond's or a Scottish independence for that matter. But there's no doubt that there was a relentless campaign of smears and of really hostile reporting. Project Fear, it was called. And I've actually taken to putting up on the dreaded Twitter thing a sort of EU scare of the day. And the latest one I saw was there were 13 former ambassadors, former British ambassadors, saying that we'd be doomed if we leave the EU. Well, of course, where do they get their pensions from? The Foreign Office. It's a bit like all those peers, Kinnock and Heseltine and Mandelson, absolutely, in the House of Lords, who say we'd be ruined if we left the EU. Well, They would say that, wouldn't they? So I think this campaign is going very well for us, even at this early stage. But we need to understand that this is going to be a long-running campaign. My own guess is that it will probably happen in about October 2017. But obviously, we need to be prepared for it to come a lot earlier. But I think there's no doubt that Cameron campaign is in serious trouble. And I do want to mention another thing I'm sure you'll have read about recently, is that in the Conservative Party, alongside the EU referendum debate, there's a separate but intertwined tussle going on for the leadership of the Conservative Party when Cameron goes. And there's no doubt that, and actually Nigel Farage has picked up on this, that Theresa May is, as I say, out on manoeuvres. And my view on that is that, those of us, I suspect many of you most of you, I suspect, are people with strong principles, but I think we need to be prepared to accept support from anybody, whatever their motives, because the cause of freeing the United Kingdom from the EU is such a great one that we mustn't ask for purity from people. We just need people who will say, yes, we would be better off out. We would be better off if we left the European Union. And I think it'll be very interesting to see over the next few weeks and months what Boris Johnson, for example, will do. He's currently sitting on the fence, but I think with Theresa May making noises, it may force Boris's hand. So it's very interesting to see what's going on there. And I think the message for all of those of us who do believe in Britain rather than the EU is that we must be prepared to work with people from anywhere. A single party on its own cannot win this campaign. We must all work together for this mighty cause. Now, I just want to end, because you've got, let's say, two excellent speakers. I've probably gone on far too long here. I just want to end very briefly by saying I said that the Freedom Association was set up in 1975 by men of courage who believed in this country and believed it had a better future. The future of this country now is in your hands, ladies and gentlemen, not in the hands of the political class. It's you that can decide this. It's you that can do something that you will be proud of the rest of your life, that your children and grandchildren will be proud of. You have the great opportunity here to get your country back again. We can win this referendum, this battle. With your help, ladies and gentlemen, we will win. We must win. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Simon. Well, that set the tone for this evening, but there's more treats to come yet, as you probably appreciate. We've got two of our EFDD MEPs on the table, and like Jill Seymour, they are actually fighting this campaign to make themselves redundant, which is an interesting scenario, but that's what it's about. So our second speaker is one of our three MEPs in the region. He's also spokesman on Commonwealth matters. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jim Carver, MEP.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for turning out on this wet, windy, dull Warwickshire evening. And I think it's very important that the EFDD group, which Bill, myself and Jill Seymour, who unfortunately can't be here tonight, are members of, have actually picked up the mantle. And although the referendum question itself may be anything up to 2 years away, we feel it's important to start engaging with the public, and throwing pens around the room, to start engaging with the public, to get them to think about this question as early as possible. Earlier today, I spoke at a debate organised by Birmingham Law Society at Birmingham Airport, where I spoke against three pro-European speakers, one a Conservative MEP, a professor at Birmingham University, and a businessman. and very much from a legal argument. And it's very clear that many people in the room have very different views to what they perceive they've got once they've listened to the argument and listened to the questions. And I think we have a very positive opportunity, and I welcome what Simon said during your talk about the positive message that we can portray in the run-up to this referendum, because I believe that after 42 years, the European Union has had long, or the institutions that it morphed from, has had long enough to provide the option to prove stability, economic success and democratic success, and quite frankly it has failed. So after 42 years, I've come to the conclusion, that I came to the conclusion 19 years ago, that there is only one option for Britain, that is to withdraw from the European Union and reclaim her place as a genuine global trading nation. We've got a unique history in the United Kingdom, very different to the continental model. And if we listen to what President de Gaulle said on the 2 occasions that he vetoed Britain's membership of the then EEC back in the 1960s, he said Britain's economic and historical model is completely different to that of the continental model. And that's what puts us at such an advantage, because we are the oldest nation among the 28 member states of the European Union. Our history predates many of those who, our history is far better actually outside the European Union, and it has been. And we've been in existence far longer. And that puts us at a huge advantage, because when we leave the European Union, the world isn't going to come to an end. The world is a far bigger place than the European Union. And it's my contention that it's our political opponents who are the people who are being negative, who are being inward-looking. But we need to look much further. We need to look to the emerging markets. We need to look to Brazil, Vietnam, the economic miracle that's happening in Asia, and realise now that the world is a far smaller place than it was when we joined the common market on the 1st of January in 1973. And we have to look at, Simon touched on the British perspective at the time that we joined the common market. We were for a very, decaying infrastructures, for a strike-torn country, very much sort of in the hands of the unions. And we looked across the channel, and it's fair to say we saw this land of milk and honey. But instead of milk and honey, all we got was regulation, and even more regulation. And if I tell you that the Lord's Prayer runs to 69 words, the 10 Commandments are 297, and the American Declaration of Independence runs to 300 words, and yet the European Union Directive with regard to the exportation of duck eggs runs to 26,911 words. That tells you exactly where we are as a nation. And don't just take my word for it. Listen to what, I spoke to the legal community today, and I quoted the words of possibly, well, I think certainly, not possibly, certainly the greatest legal mind of the 20th century, the late Lord Justice Denning. And this is I'll repeat what I said at the meeting earlier on today. And this is a quote of his when summing up in a judgment. And he said, "Our sovereignty has been taken away by the European Court of Justice. Our courts must no longer enforce national laws. They must enforce community law. No longer is European law an incoming tide flowing up the estuaries of England. It is now like a tidal wave, bringing down our sea walls and flowing inland over our fields and houses, to the dismay of all." Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've reached a situation with regards to Britain's future with the European Union, actually globally, and we have to take this opportunity to get our country back, because it's us on the leave side of the argument who are actually being positive. We're saying the world is a far bigger place than the 500 million people living in the 28 member states. We recognise we can regain so much competence in so many different areas, and we can have far greater influence outside of the European Union as opposed to what's being told by those who campaign so negatively to remain in. Take, for example, the issue of trade. At the moment, Britain does not have a seat on the World Trade Organisation on the front bench. Some of you may not be aware, but when we joined the Common Market in 1973, we actually signed that privilege away. So now, when the World Trade Organisation meets, we're represented, not just Britain, but all 28 member states are represented currently by a Swedish lady, Swedish Commissioner Cecilia Malmström. and she negotiates on behalf of the European Union, not on behalf of the 28 member states. So that's just one area where we can regain control. You know, we've got a seat on the Security Council of the United Nations. We're the lead country in the Commonwealth. We sit on so many international organisations, and it's my belief that outside the European Union we really can prosper. Because one of the things I've noticed, and I know Bill and I have spoken about this a lot, one of the things I've noticed in my short time as an MEP is the sheer bureaucracy and the sheer invisible nature of transparency. There is no transparency within the European Union. Last week, Bill and I spent 2.5 hours in the chamber voting on this year's budget. And I stood up to make a point of order before that, pointing out that should we be actually voting on an increase in the budget, or actually voting on a budget at all, when our own accounts haven't been signed off for the last 20 years. Now, I'm a small businessman. If I don't do a tax return, I'm in trouble with Companies House or with the tax office. You know, we have to be accountable. So we have this situation where the European Union is expanding. We have association agreements with new countries such as Turkey, who wants to come into the European Union. We saw the golden handshake that was given to them the other day, that golden carrot to try and entice them into joining the European Union. And yet, I recognise that only 8% of Turkey's landmass is within the continent of Europe. I'm deeply frightened by Turkey's human rights laws, but rules. We've seen what's happened with regards to their treatment of their Kurdish minority so disgracefully in a run-up to the civil war, and letting Turkish people Kurdish people onto Turkey's sovereign territory to attack Kobane in Syria on the border. And I also recognise that I don't want to be a member of a European Union enlarged with Turkey, whose borders are next to Syria and Iraq. I think that is a dangerous situation, and I think Britain has to reclaim her place and actually regain control of our affairs. We can only do that by leaving the European Union, and that's at a time, I sit on the Foreign Affairs Committee in the European Parliament, that they talk about a common foreign and defence policy, a common security policy. This is where the European Union is going. And ladies and gentlemen, I think it's about time our political class, for the first time in 2 political generations, were honest about the direction of the European Union. And to that extent, I have to agree with the late Roy Jenkins, the former president of the SDP, former European Commissioner. And he said there are now only 2 clear and consistent positions with regards to Britain's membership of the European Union. That is all in or all out. And no matter what Mr Osborne may promise today with regards to the renegotiations, if you come to the European Parliament and listen to what's being said to the MEPs, Bill will back you up, no doubt he may speak about this in his speech. If you listen to what Mr Juncker is saying, if you listen to what President Hollande is saying, if you listen to what Chancellor Merkel is saying, they're saying there can be no core renegotiation. And there can't be any renegotiation, because what Mr Osborne and Mr Cameron aren't telling you is that the last European treaty, the Lisbon Treaty, is a self-amending treaty. So if we were to gain any begrudging concessions, they could be taken back at the stroke of a pen. And we have Article 48 of that treaty, which in effect talks about the simplified revision procedure. And it lists 25 different areas, well, I'll run through them, where this part of the treaty deals with the functioning of the European Union and policies and internal actions, covering the internal market, the free movement of goods, agriculture and fisheries, free movement of persons, services and capital, area of freedom, security and justice, transport, common rules on competition, taxation and approximation of laws, economic and monetary policy, employment, social policy, the European Social Fund, education, vocational training, youth and sport, culture, public health, consumer protection, the single market, industry, economic and social and territorial cohesion, research and technological development and space, environment, energy, tourism, civil protection and administrative cooperation. So in all these 25 areas I've just told you, we've already given up our sovereignty. Now, to my mind, the great strength of British democracy is its accountability. It's very simple, and Simon touched on this. If we don't like what our politicians do, we don't vote for them at a general election. We didn't do that to Mr Major in 1997, and we didn't do that to Mr Brown in 2010. But of course that doesn't apply with European legislation, because if we seek to amend any European legislation, we have to have the agreement of all 28 member states. And it only takes one country to veto, for example, on the old chestnut of fisheries. It only takes the Spanish and the French to say no, and it's the deal's off the table. So that is why, ladies and gentlemen, we have to believe in Britain, and I say we have to return power to our sovereign parliament. And this is the crux of the argument. And if you really do believe in Britain, and you really do believe that the best people to decide who runs our country are politicians elected by a British public who can be replaced every 5 years or at a whim, I would ask you to consider my side of the argument and listen very carefully to the questions we made, because I sincerely believe that the world, ladies and gentlemen, is our oyster. But if we remain inside the European Union, our future is as a clam. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim, for that excellent speech. Now, I would come along this evening only expecting two speakers, Simon and Jim, but we've got a real bonus in that Bill's here. So I don't think Bill needs much of an introduction to most of you, but all I would say is that Bill's style and delivery of presentation is different to a lot of the other MPs that you will be hearing from, or politicians been hearing from. So I would earnestly ask you to put your hands together and welcome Bill Etheridge, MEP.
Well, I don't know what you expect after that introduction. Honestly, don't be too concerned. Anyway, my name's Bill. Who are you? I'd like to know who I'm talking to. So, I'll ask a quick question. How many of you are UKIP members? Hands up, don't be shy. Right. That's virtually everyone, I think. To those of you who aren't, thank you very much for coming. To those of you who are, I've got a few things to say to you lot. But first of all, I don't really like talking about the EU, per se. It's a bit boring here, a bit dull. I'd rather talk about some things that bother us all. And the first thing I'll ask you, and a serious question, how many of you, before we leave here tonight, are going to need a written guideline handed to you to explain to you how to live every part of your life, even to the point of when you get home, who does what proportion of the housework? Could you put your hands up if anyone needs that from me? Because I'll organise it for you. Or better still, I'll get the people like Glenys Kinnock, Neil Kinnock, Peter Mandelson, otherwise known as EU commissioners, past, fortunately, but their successors are no better, to write one out for you. Because that's what we're actually talking about. Now, I don't like being told what to do. I cannot stand it. But some people might like it. And if you do, you're probably not going to enjoy the rest of what I've got to say. Okay? Now, there's an issue that I think is more important and interesting than banging the EU, going on about them, saying how terrible they are, these commissioners, having a right go. I'll tell you something about an issue called immigration. Now, Sharpin, take a breath, what's he going to say? Immigration is the burning issue of our times. When we sit in that parliament, most of what goes on now, they're talking about migrant, crisis. Basically, they cannot control the floods of people coming across Europe. And if they can't control them coming into Europe, We sure as heck can't control them coming here. And there is an issue. Because I don't blame anyone for wanting to come here. As far as I'm concerned, this is the greatest country on earth. To be British is the greatest privilege on earth. Every one of us who is British should be damn proud of it. There is absolutely nothing wrong with someone wanting to be British. Don't blame them. There is something wrong with throwing open this offer to anybody, everybody who can possibly get here without any vetting, checking, finding out what can be brought to us and who these people are. That's a problem. And I have to tell you, there's a problem that's getting worse. For those of you, many of you UKIP members, you'll have been out in cities leafleting. I can tell you that when I go out leafleting in cities now, I tend to try and target, now this is a bit hard for this terrible racist group of people apparently we are, I actually try and target the black and Asian people, because I know they can speak English. The number of people, if you go out into Wolverhampton, I've had the experience actually in Coventry, Birmingham, elsewhere, and you go up to them to try and give them a lift, they say, what? They can't understand, because they have only recently arrived. Have we got a massive lack of people to do jobs? Is there a desperate need? Well, I would suggest that the 1 million youth unemployed would say there isn't. I would suggest that they would like a chance to start out in life like I did, stacking crates in a factory. I had a rotten attitude, I was lazy, feckless, teenager. I was vile. Worse than now, believe me. I know it's hard to swallow. No, not a lot. But the trouble was, I got that chance because there was no one else. Now, our employers have the opportunity to compete, to get people who've travelled long distances, many of whom got excellent qualifications and are hard workers. What chance does that give to our young people starting out? We have to bear these things in mind. We have to look at this. I don't mind bringing people to this country. I think we need to. We've got to know who comes. In order to do this, we have to be able to control our own immigration policy. In order to do this, we have to have control of our own borders. And in order to do this, ladies and gentlemen, I said I don't want to talk about it, but I've got to. We can't be in the EU. It is not possible to control your own immigration policy and remain within the EU. Even Dave Cameron admits that now. Can't be done. So, what else can we think about that? Let's talk about, it's not just EU bashing, not talking about these crazy folks in the EU who me and Jim have to endure. I don't want anyone else to endure what we have to go through. I don't want to come here and start telling you stories about these people because they'd make your hair curl. The place is absolutely, even yours, even mine. The place is a nut house. But all done with an overriding belief that they're doing the right thing. They're looking after you. You, every one of you, is being enfolded in the arms of a loving bureaucrat. They care. And they don't think you can make your own decisions. They know that you can't. They think if they give you too much freedom, you're going to do some very naughty things. You're going to buy cars that might emit fumes. You're going to eat fatty food, drink too much alcohol. You're going to do all sorts of really naughty things. And frankly, you don't know any better. So they're going to make sure that you don't fall victim to your own naivety. And they're sweet. It's nice. I don't want nanny state looking after me. I want to make my own decisions and live or fall by them. I want to be a free man, independent, standing up on my own 2 feet, just like my family and many other families in the areas that we've all come from have done in the past. Many of us have had hard times in the past and our families have battled through them to get to where we are today. We don't need someone handing us down, up, looking after us. We don't need that. We're people from the West Midlands of the United Kingdom. We don't need any help from anybody. We need a fair playing field. But we don't need to be looked after and nannied. And I don't want nanny state. I certainly don't want nanny super state, because that's a whole lot worse. But wait, hang on. People like me, Jim, and particularly Simon, who I'll talk about the Freedom Association later, we are very bad people. We are reckless, foolhardy. We're taking a big risk because we want to isolate our country. We want to leave poor little United Kingdom bobbing out there on the ocean while everything else goes on without us, and we're left all on our own, gently bobbing away into the distance, really irrelevant, this tiny little island. And I got a bit worried about this. Thought maybe I've gone too far. So I checked it out, and apparently there are 196 countries recognised in the world. 196. But only 28 of them are in the EU. So that means, you'll have to bear with my maths, I went to a comprehensive, 168 others, including China, America, Canada, India, Japan, Brazil, South Africa, Norway, and many others. Well, there they all stand, isolated. All 168 of them totally isolated. They don't seem to be doing too bad. It's an absolute nonsense. Overcome the fear. We really have nothing to fear. The European Union needs us. Well, it needs our money. That's the truth of it. It needs our money to spend on grand schemes, like I see in the Regional Development Committee, where they throw it all over the place. Oh, there's an area here, we're going to look after this. I don't think they've got internet coverage in the Danube area. Let's get some cash. Let's splash it around a bit. Oh, well, let's see what we can do to help these people. Well, hang on a minute. I don't particularly care whether or not they need a dog training centre in Transylvania. I'd rather that money be spent here. I don't see why our taxpayers' money should be squandered and sent all over the EU. And when I was there, I asked a question to one of the prominent MEPs from another country. I said, really, what you want is rich countries like the UK, so you can take our taxpayers' money, pick it up, and do an old-fashioned Marxist, socialist, wealth redistribution across the whole of Europe. So you take from the wealthy, the bad people like us. I didn't know, but you didn't realise how well off you were until tonight, did you? Take money from all of us, and then we'll spread it across all of the rest of Europe. That's what you want, isn't it? Now I expected him to come back all guns blazing. He said, yeah, obviously. It's not a secret. They're not hiding it. All of this is very easy to get carried away with. But when I started down my route, rabble raising and trying very hard to make an impact in politics, it wasn't just about this. This is just one issue. The EU is a big steel door, and we smash it down, and on the other side of it is our freedom to make real change in our country. That's all that it is. So it's not the end of the game. When we win this referendum, it is not the end. It's the beginning. That is the thing that we must remember. There are so many people who I've heard say, oh, well, you know, once you win the referendum, there's no need for UKIP or any other thinking like that. You've done what you set out to do. Rubbish. We will have just started. I urge you, if you don't know the Freedom Association, I urge you to take an interest in it. That's what got me started out in my interest in politics, really, truly into politics. When you want to think about your own personal freedom, your own individuality, your own rights, not the kind of rights that criminals rely on to be looked after from the European Court of Human Rights. I mean the right to stand or fall on your own. The Freedom Association helped me to develop my way of thinking, and I know it can do it for other people as well. When we've got people like Simon and UKIP members and some people from other areas as well fighting for individual freedom, then there is hope. So I say to all the UKIP members who are here, please, be encouraged and inspired, hopefully, by what you hear tonight, but don't just go out just talking about the referendum. Go into every council election, go into every police and crime commission, every election you can find, every school of governors, board of governors, everything you can find. Go out there and spread the message. Fight for individual freedom. Campaign, battle on. Talk about the things that people care about. Talk about the West Midlands Combined Authority, which is strangling us and is going to take away so many of our limited democracy as it is. Talk about immigration. Talk about personal freedom. Do not let people think that all you care about is the EU, because it is just one way forward to free us up to do what we want to do. And to the non-UKIP members, who I hope there might be some, I didn't see them, but if there were, just let me know if you want me to sign you up to the guide afterwards of how to live. If you don't, then you've heard some things tonight, and I hope you'll hear more in the questions. Somebody once said, those the gods wish to destroy their first mate mad. I tell you, if we vote to remain within the EU, we will have gone collectively insane. We will not be voting for the status quo. We will not be voting for a situation where things are okay, they carry on, you know, a bit safer than taking a risk. You'll be voting for the destruction of our country, the end of democracy, the end of individual freedom, the end of the nation state, and the end of all hope of changing it, because there will be no rerun. This is it. This is the time. One chance. If we win, they'll probably make us rerun. If we lose, forget it. It'll be over. So this is it, folks. It's that serious. There's nothing more important in any of our political lives than galvanising, getting out there, getting strong, and getting the message out. Fight for personal freedom, fight for national sovereignty, fight to leave the EU. Thank you.